And whether or not simple Snapchat boosts any of that further or brings in any of these new users, I do think as younger generations, graduate to social media or start using social media, Snapchat is in a really good position to onboard many of those people.
Hey gang, it's Tuesday, November 5th. Jasmine and listeners, welcome to Behind the Numbers Daily, a new marketer podcast. I'm Marcus. Today I'm joined by our Vice President and Principal Analyst who covers everything social media for us here. Based in California, it's Jasmine Emberg.
Hey Marcus, hey everyone.
Hello there. Okay, we start with the fact of the day. And today's one is a Finnish fact. Because Jasmine's been bullying me. She came to my home.
I'll admit it. That I did not do.
So Jasmine's Finnish, and I bring Finnish facts for her because she makes me. And they're fascinating. So I have another one. It's been a while, but I've got another one for you, Jasmine.
I'm excited.
In Finland, let's see if you can complete the sentence. In Finland, speeding tickets are...
proportional to your income.
Exactly right. Linked to your income. So John McKenna of the World Economic Forum was explaining that Finns run a day fine system. It's calculated on the basis of an offender's daily disposable income. Generally, their daily salary divided by 2, as I understand it. And the more a driver is over the speed limit, the greater the number of day fines they will receive.
It's true.
Okay. And it can get pricey. In 2023, British newspaper The Guardian wrote about a Finnish multi-millionaire businessman who was hit with a €121,000 or $130,000 fine, speeding fine, for going 50 miles an hour in a 30.
Did he pay it?
I hope so. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't check. He better have. But as the US DOJ notes, whilst Finland was the first country to introduce a day fine system in 1921. It was over 100 years old. Several other European countries have followed suit, including Germany, Austria, and France. I think the UK actually has introduced one in the last handful of years. Similar type style of fine. But yeah, it's an absolutely fascinating way to go. This is why Jasmine moved to the States. She said, I'm sick of paying these $1 million speeding fines. I'm out.
Hey. I have never gotten a speeding ticket before, and I
do
not intend to. Yep.
Ever?
Never.
Goodness, that's not true. Anyway, today's real topic. How Snap is getting on. All right, Jasmine, today we're talking about Snap. Let's start with some of their quarterly numbers to set the table. So we'll talk about their Q3 performance, just to bring people up to speed with how they've been doing in terms of users, in terms of money. So let's start with the users. Snapchat added 11 million new daily active users in Q3, bringing its worldwide total to 443 million. Last Q3, the company added 9 million. So it's 2 million fewer last quarter than this quarter. So slightly more impressive in Q3 of this year. Slice of pie is where we begin. That's how we play our first question. And we do that by creating, and I say by we, I mean Jasmine, creating a pie chart as to the reasons 3 max why Snapchat was able to grow daily active users 9% in Q3 and add those 11 million folks. Jasmine, why?
So I took this question or this pie chart literally, or maybe I should say geographically, and I looked at where those 11 million new daily active users came from. Mm-hmm. And so I am awarding 80% of the pie to the rest of the world because that region accounted for 80% or 9 million of the 11 million new users. And 20% of the pie is going to go to Europe because it accounted for 2 million of the 11 million new users, and that's roughly 20%.
Okay. What's interesting is it's averaging the same number of new daily active users per quarter this year, Q1, Q2, Q3, as it did last year. So if you look at all of last year, averaged about 10 million a quarter. If you look at the first 3 quarters of this year, it's averaging about 10 million a quarter. I think the year before that, it was averaging 14 million. So a bit of a step change from 2022. But 2023 and 2024, it's been about 10 million per quarter. It's gone up and down a little bit. But one thing that folks might notice, Jasmine, based on what you just said, is 9 million of the 11 new people coming from the rest of the world, 2 million added in Europe. And so we're missing a key region there, which is North America. Mm-hmm. Snapchat reached 100 million daily active users in North America 2 years ago. back in Q3 2022. Put another way, it's been stuck on 100 million North American users for the past 8 quarters, which is why you may have noticed Jasmine didn't mention them as a region that's added any people, because they haven't. So my question here, Jasmine, is will Snap be able to grow users or Snapchat in its North American region ever again?
Well, just about the flatness in North America first. I mean, it's certainly not good. As you mentioned, it's been at 100 million for about 2 years, but it isn't awful either, given all of the intense competition for users.
Fair.
That said, will Snap be able to grow users in the North American region is your question. And what I would say to that is certainly their key objective here, right? And so Snap talked a lot on the earnings call about a new version of the app that it's in the process of rolling out called Simple Snapchat. And currently that's only available to about 10 million people across different countries. And what they've said is that feedback so far has been good. And a lot of the reason for this rollout and this redesign, which really separates the messaging portion of the app from a content portion of the app, which will include stories and Spotlight in a unified feed, is to bring in new users or re-engage users who have lapsed, particularly in the North American region. As this rolls out, I do think we're going to see some disruption in usage and engagement. We always see that whenever a social media app rolls out a new feature or a big redesign like this. Yep. But I do think that experience will be better for users and for advertisers in the long run. And the truth is, I don't really see usage and engagement as a huge problem for Snap when compared to some of the other social media platforms, right? So even with this flatness in North America, the engagement trends among existing users are pretty strong, especially when it comes to messaging, maybe a little less so when it comes to content. And whether or not Simple Snapchat boosts any of that further or brings in any of these new users, I do think as younger generations, graduate to social media or start using social media, Snapchat is in a really good position to onboard many of those people. Where I am concerned, and I think where we're going to go next, is in how Snap monetizes those users and that engagement, because that is still somewhat of a struggle for the company.
Yes. I do want to move on to the money side of things. Quickly on the user side, just looking at the other regions, Europe, over that same period, has done pretty well. North America has been flat, but Europe has added 11 million new daily active users, going from 88 million to 99 million. So it's approaching that 100 million user ceiling that North America has been stuck at. However, Europe has twice the number of people in its countries as North America, and so there should be more room for growth in theory. The second thing here is that over half of Snapchat's users have come from outside North America and Europe, called Rest of the World, for about 2 years now. And so that has been the story for a long time. North America is just so important because that's where most of the money typically comes from. On a dollar basis, in terms of share, that share of North American revenue has been falling over time. But looking at the dollars, Jasmine, Snap made close to $1.4 billion in Q3, growing 15% year on year. That's 3 times faster than the same period last year, which was just 5% growth in Q3 2023. So Jasmine, playing Slice of Pie again, create a pie chart as to the reasons, 3 max, why Snap was able to grow revenue 15% in Q3, approaching that $1.4 billion in the quarter.
So I struggled a little bit with how big to make each slice in this one, but here are the 2 slices. The first is the revamp of its direct response ad platform, and this is the biggest slice. Snap, of course, has been working really hard to improve its offering. It's making or giving advertisers more options. It's making it easier for them to advertise and to drive results. And now we're seeing that work is starting to pay off, given the growth in its direct response ad business, as well as the number of active advertisers. The challenge, of course, going forward is going to be to get those advertisers to continue and to commit and grow their commitments on the platform. And the second slice is Snapchat Plus, which now has 12 million subscribers and was a really meaningful contributor to growth, even though if you look at the overall revenue that it generated, it was somewhat less than 123 million, which was Snap's non-ad revenue figure. And most of that, of course, came from Snapchat Plus.
Okay. Yeah, Snapchat Plus, it's paying subscribers $4 a month for that subscription, I think $3.99. Now with 12, up from 11 that it reported in August. And Andrew Hutchinson from Social Media Today was putting that in context by saying X, Twitter, has been struggling to reach even 1.3 million X premium signups versus the 12 million that Snapchat Plus now has. So it doesn't sound like billions. It doesn't need to be, but in context for people paying for a subscription to a social media platform, it's doing a lot better than some of its competitors in that space.
And to give it a little bit more context too, if you think back to, I think it was September of 2023, sometime last year, CEO Evan Spiegel talked about these stretch goals that the company had for 2024. And one of them was having Snapchat Plus reach 14 million subscribers by the end of the year. And so if it continues, it's well on its way to reaching that goal.
Yeah.
And he also had a goal of reaching about 500 million in non-ad revenue, which of course, again, is primarily Snapchat Plus subscriptions. And I calculated out over the 3 quarters to where Snap is, mainly because I predicted that it would reach that 500 million. And it's currently at 315 million in non-ad revenue. So it's got 185 million more to make in Q4. So we'll see how that goes.
Normally a big quarter, so doable. Interesting. I thought there were also some other positive signs, financial signs from the company. It's a sustained period of growth because 15% in Q3 is the 3rd consecutive quarter of double-digit growth, which I think is impressive. And it's worth noting that before that, the company had grown. Last year it was negative in Q1 and Q2, and then in Q3 and Q4 it was 5% apiece. So this 21% in Q1, 16 the next quarter, and 15 that they just recorded is incredibly impressive given where they were last year. Number 2, they're creeping closer and closer towards profitability. They lost $153 million in Q3 of this year. That's half as much as they lost the same period the year before. So that's going in the right direction. And then average revenue per user as well, up 6% year on year. So that's also solid.
And I think those are both really good points when you're thinking about the stock market reaction for its Q3 earnings, right? I mean, we know that Snap has been really volatile. And I think the sustained growth in its revenues as well as the Q3 revenue beat really did help its stock rise, which is something that we haven't seen or we didn't see in the previous quarter.
Yeah, that's a great point. Let's end, Jasmine, by talking about what else you're paying close attention to when it comes to Snap.
Okay, 2 things. The first is brand advertising. We talked a little bit already about the revamp of Snap's ad platform that's been really focused on its performance ad business. That drove, the growth in its ad revenues. But brand advertising has been down by 1% over the past 2 quarters. And Snap said that it's not expecting a recovery there in Q4. And that's particularly problematic because Q4, of course, is the big holiday shopping period where historically brand advertising has played a really big role. And on the earnings call, executives tried to temper some of the investor concern by saying it's a back-end weighted quarter, which is true. And there isn't full visibility on demand through the end of the period. But it is going to have to figure out how to re-accelerate the growth in brand advertising going into 2025. So that was one big weak spot for me.
Okay.
The other thing that I wanted to talk about, and you and I have talked about this before, is sponsored snaps.
Yep.
That was a huge topic of conversation for investors on the earnings call as well. And, something that you and I both talked about as being worth watching, even more so than the app redesign or simple Snapchat. Messaging with friends and with family in particular is still the core of Snapchat. Snap called it out as continuing to be the biggest driver of growth. But it is the one part of the app where advertisers haven't ever been welcome. So I do imagine as Snap rolls out sponsored snaps or ads within the messaging surface, there will be a lot of demand. I also expect it's going to take time for that demand to ramp up and meaningfully contribute to Snap's revenue, partly because Snap has to roll those ads out carefully, and also because advertisers are still a little bit wary about advertising in the messaging surface, even though they know that that's where a lot of the engagement on Snapchat is happening.
That was one of the other things I thought you were going to mention. So I got 2 of the 3 or 4 that you brought up. One that I had written down that we've not talked about yet, but is Evan Spiegel, the CEO, saying the company is now testing an AI-powered video generation tool, which they say is meant to turbocharge content growth. Any reaction to this, or is this just, table stakes, it seems, maybe at this point, social media companies?
Yeah, I mean, AI is table stakes at this point for social media companies. I think Snap is doing what it can to use AI, and particularly generative AI, to create more compelling experiences for people on Snapchat. I mean, it's incorporating Gen AI into lenses or its filters, for example. It's also starting to use Gen AI to create more experiences for Spectacles, which it also announced in Q3, the newest iteration of them. So, yeah, I mean, it's all of these things could help drive engagement on the app going forward.
Yeah. Really quickly on that point, I mean, they announced them, but they announced them before Meta said, hey, check out these Orion AR glasses. And then they had some other glasses a concept pair that they were talking about, looking to put out further down the road. Does this kill Spectacles dead in the water? Like, what's your reaction to that area of competition with these social platforms being smart glasses?
It certainly ups the competition, right? Now that Meta has entered the race with Orion. You know, Meta has a ton of resources, a lot more resources than Snap has. I will say the one difference right now is that Spectacles is not a consumer product, and Snap hasn't given a firm timeline into when they will be released to the public. Right now, they're available to developers. And the one thing that Snap has kept saying about that is that they want to give it to developers first who can develop experiences for the device so that there is a compelling use case once it goes to consumers. And Meta's Orion glasses also aren't available yet, even though I think they are already a consumer product. So there will certainly be a lot of competition once these are released to the market.
It does seem like a bit of a double-edged sword, doesn't it? Because as soon as Meta announced their product, for Snap, it was both, this is bad for us because now there's a very strong competitor in this space. But on the other hand, this is good for us because it validates this wearables market.
Completely. And I think, you know, this has been a story with Snap and Meta for a long time, right? You know, Snap invents a product or a feature and Meta takes it and runs with it and makes it bigger and makes more money off of it. And I could certainly see that happening here as well. And if you look at the demand for Meta's Ray-Ban smart glasses, you know, if that translates into demand for the Orion glasses, I mean, Snap has its work cut out for it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's where we have to leave today's episode. Jasmine, thank you so much as always for spending time with me and the listeners today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. Thank you to Victoria. She edits the show and Stuart runs the team. Sophie does our social media, so thank you to those folks. And thanks to everyone for listening into the Behind the Numbers Daily, an eMarketer podcast. You can tune in tomorrow to the Reimagine Retail show hosted by Sarah Lebo, where she speaks with analysts Sarah Marzano and Ariel Fager, all about the emergence of financial and travel media networks.